Hello.
Hello.
So,
Take a deep breath.
yes,
Say your name, pronounce it,
my name is Brenda Davis, Davis.
and go ahead.
Yes, I have been living in Nebraska since 2008, but prior to that, I grew up here, Southeast High School here in Lincoln. I was very involved in the arts, drawing classes, and as well as theater. And then I left to go to college in Chicago because I wanted to pursue a career in theater. I went to Loyola University there as a theater major, a philosophy minor, and graduated. And by the time I graduated, I realized I was a set designer, not an actor. And it was wonderful because it sort of unifies my ability to draw with my lots of theater. So therefore, I started assisting a professor of mine at the time, freelanced in Chicago. His shows went all over the United States. One of his shows went to Australia. Some of them were on Broadway. One of them written by a local Nebraskan named Mary Zimmerman, if you've heard of her. Her parents were both professors at the University of Nebraska. So after freelancing in Chicago for 4 years and assisting Dan Osling, I then went to grad school at Yale in Connecticut at the Yale School of Drama. Has since changed its name to the David Geffen School of Drama, which I sort of oppose, but I'm sure he gave many dollars, so that's wonderful. But I went to Yale. And then after graduation, I was pregnant with my first daughter and came running back to Nebraska, which is an amazing place to raise children. My mother works for the district court here in Lincoln. And my husband's an attorney, and he was looking for work in 2008, which was a terrible time to look for law jobs. But she knew a lawyer down in Beatrice named Rob Schaefer, and was hired and is now a partner of Rob Schaefer's in Beatrice. And so what is there for me to do? I design regionally. I also teach at the University of Nebraska part-time, and I've taught at Doane on occasion. And this semester I'm very excited. I'm designing a show for Doane and one for Wesleyan as well. Recently appointed to the Nebraska Arts Council and happy to serve.
Thank you very much. Are there
The caller,
Matt
Monheiser, has joined the conference.
Yes, Senator Cavill.
Thank you, Chairman Lowe. Thank you, Ms. Davis, for willingness to serve on the Arts Council. Just try to break the ice for everybody here. Can you just tell us what is the Arts Council?
The Arts Council. It's a wonderful organization, which before I was involved with it, I have to say I was concerned that, after being in Chicago and close to New York, what is Nebraska doing in the arts? Nebraska Arts Council is an organization that both supports local artists that might not feel like they have a very strong voice, and also educates people who are not involved in the arts about all the artists, all the talent that we have in Nebraska. I was so thankful to get involved and to start digging through all of the events and the artists that they support, and to get to know all the art festivals that I otherwise might not, with now 3 children, might not have been aware it was even going on. So they have a wonderful infrastructure for supporting the artists and sharing the news of the arts in Nebraska.
And it does it through grants?
Yes. Yes.
What's the source of the grant fund?
The source of the grant. This is why I married a finance major who became a lawyer, because he does my taxes. He takes care of all. I am the artist. I draw the pictures. Mike Markey, our wonderful interim director, is also a wizard at the finances. But it comes from. You're gonna have to fill in for me.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I'm just curious.
Anyway, it comes from tax dollars, of course, and it comes from the Nebraska Endowment. So yeah.
Can I ask one more question?
Yeah.
It's out of left field. Are you a dramaturg?
I am a set designer. So all the beautiful scenery that you see on stage moves. Some of it moves. Sometimes you watch a play in a unit set. That is that's the set designer's job, is to create the world that you're seeing on stage. Yeah. So I draw architectural drawings. I build 3-dimensional models to turn in, to show the director. And then we sort of make changes, and then it turns it over to the technical department, who builds it and paints it and does all the props and all of that stuff. So,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Are there any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our next appointee is Crystal Dunning. Excuse me. Are there any opponents? Are there any proponents? I have those in the wrong order. Are there any in the neutral? Okay, thank you. Now, Crystal, Ms. Dunning. Welcome to the General Affairs Committee.
Hello.
How are you?
Doing all right.
All right.
Crystal Dunning, Dunning.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I am actually originally from Louisiana, South Louisiana. I moved to Nebraska when I began my master's program at UNL in voice performance. During that time and slightly before, I had the opportunity of spending the summers in northern Michigan working for a nonprofit called Laughlin. And that's really where, I guess you'd say, my love of performance and my love of administration combined. I started to really recognize just how much went into putting on a performance. And shortly after finishing my master's, I started working for the Lincoln Community Playhouse, doing their development and also educational programs. Really enjoyed that. I had to move to Louisiana for a short stint and then moved back and now work remotely for a company, but have really enjoyed living here in Nebraska. I guess what I would say I'm most excited about with having the opportunity to work with the Nebraska Arts Council is helping individuals in a state that I have flourished as an artist and a teacher, and being able to, or knowing how much the grants and the funding impact local nonprofits and local organizations, and having an opportunity to be a part of that, to help those organizations. I myself know that the arts are an undeniably important aspect of any young person's education. I also know that I myself have been able to develop as a person and really look forward to being able to serve in this capacity.
All right. Thank you very much. Are there any questions for Ms. Dunning? Yes, Senator Raven.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Dunning. I have a question. Are you going to still participate in performances? Are you still involved in the Lincoln Community Playhouse?
I am. There's a show that opens this Friday that I am stage managing. So if anyone is interested, please join us.
Terrific. Thank you.
Yes, Senator Kavanaugh.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, first off, what's the show?
The Mountaintop. It is a reimagining of the evening before Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination.
Oh,
Well, thanks for sharing that. So my question was, I was looking at your application. So you're a reappointment, right?
no.
No? Am I reading? Did I misread this? Apparently I did misread it. I apologize. Well, anyway, but my question still stands of, so you wrote you're passionate about making art accessible to all individuals. Is there a particular way that you see that the Arts Council could facilitate that? Or is there something like, I don't know if you have any particular ideas or suggestions or things?
Yeah, I'd say the one that comes to mind is while I was working at the Playhouse, I had the opportunity to serve on a grant panel, several grant panels for the Nebraska Arts Council. And what I enjoyed most about those was being able to, not personally, but know that the applicants were able to get feedback on their grants.
The caller,
and their grant application.
Matt
And
Monheiser,
that-
has left the conference.
And that is something that, having worked with grants in the past, isn't always accessible to the nonprofit. And I think that it's one, important, and two, very helpful for the nonprofit, because as they're able to strengthen their grant application and become more likely for funding, they're able to strengthen their overall funding and programming. And organizations who are maybe smaller or in less populated areas are often the organizations I see that maybe struggle with that. So.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Kavanaugh. Are there any other questions? Seeing none. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And are there any proponents? Seeing none, are there any opponents? Seeing none, are there any in the neutral? All right, thank you.
The caller, Matt Monheiser, has joined the conference.
The next appointment for the Nebraska Arts Council is Karen Harris. Welcome to the General Affairs Committee. State your name and then spell it if you would, please.
Karen Harris, Harris.
Go ahead.
I live in York, Nebraska, a little bit in Lincoln and our condo here. I was born and raised in Nebraska. I gone to school in Nebraska, graduated from the university. My father was associated with the university, so it's never been very far from my life. I've always lived in Nebraska. My husband is a retired mortician, the next mayor of York. So I've been involved in a lot of community things, sort of as the support system. I'm not an artist or anything artistic. I am what every artist in art endeavor needs: an audience, a supporter, a patron. And I have been volunteering and doing that for my adult life. I'm currently involved with, I've been involved with the League for a number of years as a Friends of League, and actively involved with that, and now on the Lead Advisory Board. I'm on the Hickson Lead Board. I've been involved in the Stewart Museum. I've been involved, most of the things that where I've lived, I have been involved either as a docent or part of the board and the planning, facilitating. I think for me, one of the important things that I have found, the arts are so vital in all of our lives, but you have to be exposed to them to appreciate and to know that. And in Lincoln and Omaha, we're very spoiled. We have so much right at our fingertips, but that's not the case in much of Nebraska. And so some of the programs that I've worked with and really facilitated, especially through the League, were things like Arts Across Nebraska and Artist in Residence programs, where part of what we do is make sure that the artist takes their talent to the community so that the kids involved can have a hands-on experience and appreciate it. We've helped secure funding for various communities. There's
You're
yellow
fine.
light.
You can finish up through the yellow.
Anyway, to bring children in to be exposed to art performances, art exhibits, have art shows and display their crafts or artwork in various places. And for the first time in their lives have been able to appreciate what it's really like. Sorry.
Thank you, Ms. Harris. Are there any questions? Well, I'd just like to say thank you for being a supporter of art and by doing it most of your life. That's quite a commitment.
Thank you.
Any other questions? None?
Make a statement.
Yes.
You're from my district. I'm proud to be, proud that you're on this. So that's great.
Thank you, Senator Hughes. Well, thank you, Ms. Harris. I'll ask if there are any proponents. Any opponents? Anybody in the neutral? All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
As we screen through the Nebraska Arts Council. Yeah. Yes, we have Sharon Hofschire.
Good afternoon. I'm Sherry Hofschire. It's Hofschire.
I was just told if you could spell your whole name.
Oh, okay. My official name is Sharon, Sharon. You got the Hofschire part. I live in Omaha. I grew up in Nebraska. I was originally appointed to the Arts Council Board, so I'm asking for your reappointment confirmation. And it was 2 years ago that I was appointed, November of 2020. I have had the privilege of being able to serve on the Arts Council Board for the past 2 years as chair. And we've done a number of things which I will get into. I'm now retired. I was an art historian and an arts educator at the University of Nebraska at Omaha for 16 years. During that time, I worked in a great deal of curriculum development and worked with teachers and educators in arts integration. I did a number of workshops across the state, as well as a week-long workshop we did every summer for teachers. So I had people from all of your areas who came in for workshops, and I did a lot of going out to places for workshops, as well as working with the fine arts standards when they came into being a couple years back. So I've had the opportunity to be in a lot of areas of Nebraska and watch what the impact of arts can do on communities. NAC has had a very busy past year. I would like to, first of all, do a shout out to those of you who were involved and to those of you who are not going to be involved. For last year, the legislature passed funding for the creative districts. And that has a program that is impacting in a tremendous way in all areas of the state. They originally thought that there would be maybe 10 communities that would apply for funding through the creative districts. It ended up being, we're at 30 and we're not done yet. And thanks to Senator John Stinner and Senator Mike Flood, who increased the funding last year from what the original ask was. We are seeing communities coming together because you have to have a civic involvement, as well as a business involvement, as well as the cultural aspect. But they see this as a tremendous opportunity with economic development and tourism, which of course is economic development. And so we thank you so much for that funding. The Arts Council is really overwhelmed right now with trying to get it all done, but it is happening. I feel very passionate about my job and what I am doing, even though it's a volunteer job. I attended the regional meetings from Mid-America Arts Alliance and national meetings from the National Assembly of State Arts Agencies. But I and I plan to go out on the Office on Wheels this summer with the staff as they do some creative districts and other listening forums. So I really would like to continue. I feel that I have a great deal to offer with my background, but I also have a big interest because I really do see how communities and people are responding. And if I may say, in response to your questions, Senator Kavanaugh, about funding, Brenda was right in her answer. The creative districts are funded all with state money. But there are many of the grants that are funded throughout all the state come from the National Endowment for the Arts. So it's federal money that's siphoned through. And we have a lot of balance across the state with all 3 congressional districts, but also the Creative Aging Program that we have going now, which is another really impactful. That money came from the National Assembly of State Arts Agencies through a foundation. So there are a number of ways that programs can be funded. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Are there any questions? Yes, Senator Holdcroft.
I have more of an education question for myself, being one of the new guys on the block.
Sure.
So you've been on for a couple of years.
Mhm.
How often does the council meet? What kind of actions do you take? And what do you think is the greatest accomplishment of the council over the last couple of years?
Very good questions. We meet now 4 times a year. That's varied. For a while, it was 3 times a year when things were all in person. Now 4 times a year because of the laws that we can have 2 virtual and the votes count and 2 in person. So we're meeting 4 times a year now. And the things we vote on will be affirmation, ratification of programs, obviously all of the finances, which are a huge part of it. And we are in, our only hire would be the executive director hire, and then the rest of the staff is hired on, so we do that vote. I'm looking through the agenda as I'm answering this. Anything that has to do with finances or with major programming would go through us. The most impactful thing, I think I have to go back to the support that we have been giving the council with the creative districts. I think that really is encouraging them to continue doing it. And when we saw that it was getting larger, we approved the fact that they were going to ask for, we are asking in this legislative session in the budget for another person, because we've got people who are working a third of their overtime trying to fill all that's happening. It's wonderful that so many communities want to be involved in it. But we need to keep the people going, because we are actually doing the programming on this. Whereas many of the other grants, we give them money and they do all the work. But in this case, we're also helping them get their programming done. It's a long answer.
You, Senator Holdcroft. Senator Hughes.
Thank you, Chairman. And thanks for being here. And yeah, sorry, you're going to get all the questions from the new people too, because we're like,
No, that's
so
fine.
Curious, how many employees then are a part of the Nebraska Arts Council?
Right
And
now,
then-
there are 10.
10, okay.
Mhm.
And then second, you said new is this creative district. Can you explain what that is? and how
Creative
that
districts
works?
is basically, it isn't the whole city. It would be a part of a town. It might be the whole town if it's a very small community, but it's where the civic part, it can be the city council or mayor's office or whatever, of businesses, and the cultural, and that cultural could be an art museum, it can be the theater, whatever, get together and they say, we have a lot going in this community that we think people would like, that people benefit from and other people would like to come and see. And they put together, they go through an analysis of how many people come to visit their city over time and all. And then what do we have that we know we can offer? And what do we have that we can build on? And that's what the really exciting part is, that there are so many of these communities that are sitting back and saying, wow, we could take this, or, we might be able to bring in the Native American tribe into this as we're planning a particular thing that we've never done before, but why not now? And so bringing the community together into what can be offered in a cultural way. And that can be everything from a festival to an ongoing type of a tour of your town and all the things you could do within it. I mean, there is no limit on what those parameters could be.
Okay, thank you.
Does that explain?
Yes, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Kavanaugh.
Thank you, Chairman Lowe, and thank you. Is it Hofschire? Is that it?
Yes.
Thank you for your willingness to continue to serve, especially having been through it. So I've got questions about the creative district as well, and I appreciate you clarifying on my previous question. So you said you got 30 applications when you're expecting 10. Is there a cap at 10, or is there a
No, their original ask to the legislature for funding, they were doing on the basis of, well, as we look around the state, we think 10 is about the number of places that will look at doing it. That's where the 10 came from. It was not a cap. And that's then when, like I said, Senator Stinner and Senator Flood said, wait a minute, we think this is going to take off because of the economic impact. And they raised the funding, and consequently, the districts can apply up to a certain amount of money for their first planning process and implementation to begin with. Then they can apply for up to $250,000 for the next, if they want to take that and develop it into something even bigger. So there is, it's considerably wonderful money for communities. And I think one of the things that personally, I knew that there would be places in the bigger cities that would be more organized and maybe have more staff to be able to, pull this kind of thing together. What's been so exciting is that there are so many smaller towns and smaller communities that are doing it because they see the value in it, and they're pulling it together wonderfully. And we've got basically more smaller communities involved.
It's great to hear. So, and you said there may be a request for more money for staff to assist with the process. And I'm sorry, I'm trying to catch up. I know I voted for this bill, but I'm trying to remember everything that was in it.
That was not included in the bill.
Not the staff part, but
Right.
the awards of the funds. Would there be a potentiality that, I assume that there's a finite amount of money that we gave. Do you think down the road we would come back and say this arts district thing, or what do we call it, creative district thing, is fantastic? We want to do another grant of those larger sums in the future, or is it, I guess, do you know what I'm saying? Is that clear?
I understand. No, it's a fair question. I can't say for sure what's happening right now, since there's, we're talking about 30 communities, which may not be the end. It may go up to 40 or 50 as that continues. And as this process goes through, we're talking 7-8 years, down the line before. So I'm not sure. What I found with the Arts Council, as with other organizations, you do your planning as you see the impact and what you need. So I can't say we will come back, but I certainly won't say that we won't. Probably it would not be in the next couple of years to ask for more funding.
Okay.
Other than for the position, which would be very helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Kavanaugh. Are there any other questions? You said you were in art restoration?
No, art history.
Art history, okay.
Yes.
I
I'm not like Brenda. I can't do the drawing and all
Okay.
that. I'm like Karen, I'm an appreciator.
I visited the Gerald Ford Restoration Facility, and what a phenomenal facility to
Yeah.
have here in Nebraska.
It is.
All right. Well, thank you, Mrs. Hofschire.
Thank you all very much.
Are there any opponents? Are there any opponents? Is there anyone in the neutral? Seeing none, we'll close the hearing on Ms. Hofschire. And you'll see our members leave occasionally. There are other committees going on now, and they will leave to go introduce a bill. So that's why they're getting up and leaving. They're not bored with this or anything else. They're here for you. Mark Laughlin, if you would please come up for the Nebraska Arts Council. You'll please pronounce your name and then spell your full name.
Mark Laughlin, Laughlin.
All right, can you please tell about yourself?
I was born and raised in Omaha and raised all my kids, still live in Omaha. This is my second time on the Arts Council. And I'm happy to answer any questions on my background, but in the interest of your time, just maybe turn to a couple of highlights to touch on some questions that have been asked. You all give us, give or take, around $2 million a year, which we then turn around and give out as grants throughout the state. We have a very robust process. The staff puts in a lot of time, and then we have grant panels where we bring in outside experts, and then non-experts like me sit in on these and review the grants. It's really interesting. It's my favorite part of being on the council is that you get to learn what's going on throughout the state. I know what's going on in Omaha, but there's lots of things that I've learned, really neat things that are going on. So I want you to know that we are, we take our fiduciary responsibility seriously. We have a very robust process in terms of taking the money that you entrust to us to grant out. As previously referenced, we also get money from the federal government. So that is through the NEA. And so that's another source of our funds that we also administer and give out. And then one other thing that's, I don't know if it's unique, but I did want to make sure that everybody on the council or in this committee rather was aware that, so we have, you all have over the last 20 or so years set up a fund where you all have put in aggregate around $12.5 million into this fund that, generates earnings. And then the legislature has said, but you can't have that money unless you, the Nebraska arts community, raises a similar amount. And so we, including, but all of us, so there is a separate private fund that sits with, that where about 12.5 million-ish has been raised over the years. The state fund alone for so you all over the years have put in $12.5 million. The earnings or drawdowns, if you will, over time are about 13 million. And so the dollars, for every dollar that you've put into this fund, there's already been $1 of earnings that have been given to the Nebraska arts community. And for every dollar, because you kind of have said, you got the people have to raise $1. You've got $2 that are sitting there that are going to continue to earn interest in perpetuity. You all have also committed to putting in additional monies to take your 12.5 million up to 20 million by 2030, if and only if we do our part and get our 12 million on the private side up to 20 million. And so I just throw out, first of all, thanks. But second of all, and this is the real point of this slight mini ramble, the dollars you're going to ask to be, you guys are going to look at the budget and there's going to be $1 million in there that's statutory. You've already passed and said, we're going to put $1 million in. And then this year, you're going to be asked to authorize that $1 million. And I just will throw out to you without knowing whether this is true or not. But in my limited knowledge, when you go to 2050, when I won't be around, I'm gonna throw out that the dollars, that $1 million that you give to put in that fund for us, for the arts people in America, or of Nebraska rather, that's gonna be the biggest dollar that'll have the most impact in Nebraska in 2050 and beyond, and that will be your biggest legacy, ongoing legacy. I don't know how much bigger and better investment you could ever be. I'm consider myself a fiscal conservative, and it's kind of like this is the biggest no-brainer that there's ever been. So it's been really fun and rewarding for me to be part of this art council. So I'll be quiet with that.
Thank you very much. I let you finish your statement. We went over a little bit there, but I noticed you weren't looking at the light, but I think you explained a lot for us. So are there any questions?
You guys are easy.
We are.
Yes, Senator Raybold,
No,
Jeff,
I don't.
okay, Senator Hughes.
Yeah. Thank you, Chairman. So you'd mentioned that the state, again, newbie, 2 million a year you get from the state, and then like approximately what is the budget every year for the Arts Council, counting your federal funds as well? I mean, is there an average? Does it really vary?
It doesn't vary, and don't quote me on this, okay,
Right,
but
just general is
I
fine.
want to say it's about 2 million from the state and $1 million of federal, and then we have other, I'm guessing, and again, don't hold me to this, Senator, I should probably know this, but call it 3 to 4 million.
3 to 4 million. Okay, no, thank you. That's what I was curious about. Thank you.
Senator Hardin.
Are there local partnerships as well? Since there are often memberships and subscriptions and that kind of thing. I'm from the Scottsbluff area, and we have the Midwest Theater, for example. And so
Right.
you can participate that way
Right.
and do partnerships with the college and whatnot. And so I'm assuming those are monies that are above and beyond what you're talking about in terms of, shall we call the government money the seed money for what happens? Is that correct?
When you say over and above that money, you mean that money meaning what?
Meaning what you just defined as the state and the federal dollars that are coming in. So those, when I go and pay for tickets to go to the Midwest Theater, that kind of thing in my hometown, obviously that doesn't create free tickets for the public.
Right.
So just curious about those partnerships and how that works. And essentially, where do these monies go when we say they're coming in complete? It's an opportunity to talk. I've actually worked as a professional actor, so I'm letting you tell us what the dollars do, I guess.
100%. Let me try to give you the executive summary version. So there are big arts organizations that we call basic support grantees. And like Mona, for example, and I'm on the board of the Omaha Community Playhouse. That's one of the arts organizations. So they get a certain percentage of that money divvied up as we do it through our grant panels. Then we have things on the other end, like we have $500 bus programs. So if you, in Scottsbluff, if Scottsbluff Public Schools wants to bring their kids to your great theater, they can apply for a $500 grant to pay for the buses to get them there. We have traveling Nebraska artists who say, I am a talented artist or a talented singer. I want to go out to Nebraska venues and have the Arts Council pay me, fund it 100% so that I can go out and do that. We fund those sorts of things. So there's a bunch of different programs through which these grants are made, but the whole focus for us is to get these to arts organizations or artists.
So that at a local level, they can seed, incentivize, and essentially build that arts culture at a local level.
That's the goal.
Okay.
Thank you, Senator Hardin. Are there any other questions? Seeing none? Thank you, Mr. Sullivan.
Thank you.
Are there any proponents? Are there any opponents? Is there anybody in the neutral? Seeing none, we'll close the hearing on Mr. Laughlin and we'll move on to Ann Michelle Dudley. Is Ann Michelle here? Ann Michelle, are you with us?
Oh,
Are you here?
let's see.
Ann? Michelle? Miss Dudley? I think she was here.
Technology.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now, yes. Can you hear us?
Okay, great. I apologize. I have laryngitis, so,
All right.
um,
Can you,
so, and,
yes.
yes,
Can you say
last
your
name,
name and then pronounce it?
sure. Ann Michelle Dudley, Dudley.
Okay. Can you pronounce or spell your full name, please?
Mm-hmm. ANNMICHELLE, and then DUDLEY.
Okay, thank you. Can you give us a brief explanation about you? And you got about 3 minutes.
Sure. Okay. So grew up in Lincoln Southeast. Received my master's from the University of Nebraska at Lincoln in speech pathology. I've lived in Norfolk with my husband, raising our 2 sons for the last 30 years. This is my second term on the Nebraska Arts Council. Previously, I was on the Nebraska Cultural Endowment Board for 2 terms. I'm a big advocate for the mission and the purpose of our Norfolk Arts Center. I was on their board for over 13 years and also president of that board. And I'm also involved with the Zone After School program in Norfolk. It's a nonprofit that cultivates character development and high-risk youth in our community. So that's me in a nutshell.
Oh, wonderful. All right. Are there any questions for Ms. Dudley? I don't see any questions right now. So if you hang on for just a second, I'll ask for opponents, proponents, and those in the neutral. I see nobody coming out against you. Thank you for joining us today.
All right. Thank you for your time and your support.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Dudley. Okay. We'll close that on Ms. Dudley. And that does it, I believe, for the Arts Council.
The caller, Ann Michelle Dudley, has left the conference.
All right, our next appointment is Jeffrey Galyen from the State Racing Commission. Welcome to the General Affairs Committee.
Good afternoon. I'm Jeff Galyen, Jeffgalyen. I have been on the Racing Commission for 12 years. We've now become the Racing and Gaming Commission in the last few years. I am an attorney in Norfolk, Nebraska. Went to school here in Lincoln and practiced in Lincoln for a handful of years before I moved to Norfolk. Grew up in Atkinson, Nebraska, lifelong Nebraska resident. I've been around horse racing for most of my life, and that's how I found myself on the Racing Commission. Things have changed quite a bit in the last couple of years, as you all know. We went from a commission that met 5 or 6 times a year to a commission that meets generally at least monthly. From a time standpoint, it was an appointment that required, as time, it depended on the meeting, but a handful of hours preparing for each meeting to now sometimes it's 30 to 40 hours a month. Depending on what we have going on with applications and the process at this point in time. So our landscape has changed dramatically in the last few years. So I will just leave it at that and answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much. Senator Holdcroft.
Thank you for coming today.
Sure.
Again, I'm the new guy on the block, so assume I know nothing. So we'll start off with how many members are on the commission?
7 members.
7 members. And what do you see as the major decisions you're going to make in the next months or years? And if you want to express an opinion on that, I'd be interested in it also.
Probably won't get me to express opinions, but what the voters passed was a directive that casinos would be authorized where racetracks were licensed. We have 6 licensed racetracks right now. So probably the biggest question down the road will be whether any additional racetracks are licensed. The legislature's already weighed in on this to some degree last year by requiring some studies that would impact that analysis. And I know that there are some bills pending that might influence that as well. So that's probably the biggest questions we're going to face.
Thank you, Senator Holdcroft. Senator Raybold.
Mr. Galyen, thank you for being here. You had expressed that you have experience in horse racing, or you grew up with that. Could you tell us a little bit more?
Sure. My dad owned racehorses, so I spent time. I grew up around horses, but not really racehorses. But my dad owned racehorses, so from the time I was probably 10 or 12, I have gone to live horse racing. I enjoy it. I still spend family vacations going to racetracks around the country. So I am passionate about horse racing in general.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Senator Raybold. Any other questions? So, Mr. Galyen, you said you've been on for 12 years now.
Yes.
And you've been on through the transition from horse racing into horse racing and gambling. How's it working out?
I think it's working out well. It's an interesting process for me. I'm a business and transactional lawyer. I don't go to court. If this process happened in private business with a business of mine or one of my clients, after the voters approved this and after you as legislators put it into play, a private business would have went out and hired 20 or 25 people, and this could have happened quicker. That is not possible under the structures and the restrictions of state government. The hiring processes are slower. You can't borrow money to do that. So it's simply not possible to move at the speeds that you could have in private business. And I think that is a little bit frustrating to a lot of people. But the reality is, I think the commission moved as quickly and appropriately as it could have, given the restraints that we're under.
All right. Thank you. How's the horse racing as a whole developing because of this?
That's a very good question. Horse racing, the horse racing industry is, in my mind, a very important industry for Nebraska. And I think it's underestimated in the jobs that it provides. Those jobs start with horse farms where these horses are bred and raised, where they're cared for in the winter. The hay and grain that's provided to these horses, the vets, and this goes on and on through the customers and et cetera. I think it's a vital industry. The states that are thriving in thoroughbred racing nationally are states that get help from expanded gambling. That's just the reality. The states that don't, those industries are suffering. And what our voters and legislators did here is potentially save a industry and allow it to thrive and grow on its own, I think, with the help of the expanded gambling connected to those racetracks.
Thank you.
It'll take time, but I think the prospects are great.
All right, thank you. Senator Hughes.
So, yeah, thanks for coming. Newbie, going back, you said there's 6 licensed racetracks in Nebraska. Are they all thoroughbred or is it?
One is
Five and
quarter
one?
horse, the
One's
other
quarter
5 are
horse.
thoroughbred.
Okay.
Yes.
Is there, what's the difference between the two? Will all be benefited by the gambling piece of it?
They will.
Yeah.
Yes, they'll all be benefited by the gambling.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, seeing no other questions. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Now I will ask for proponents.
Good afternoon, Chairman Lowe, members of the committee, Lynn McNally, LYNNE, capital MC, capital NALLY, representing the Nebraska HBPA and Warhorse Casino Lincoln, Warhorse Casino Omaha. Here today to testify in support of Mr. Galyen. As he said, he's been at the commission now for 12 years. I have been with the Horsemen for 20, and there is no one in the state of Nebraska that appears in front of the commission more than me. He is exhaustive in his research and his preparation for the hearings. And we certainly do not always agree, but there is no question that he cares very deeply about the racing industry in particular and wants it to succeed and thrive, especially in the current environment. That's extremely important to us and is extremely valuable for a commissioner on this commission in particular. So I would testify in support of his reappointment to this commission and would be happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Ms. McNally. Are there any questions? Yes.
It's just more of a question about your position in Warhorse. And again, new guy, so still learning. Lincoln doesn't have big horse racing right now, does it?
They do not now, but they will.
Okay, that's really my question. You see that as I know, certainly I think the casino's going to do well, but are you counting on Lincoln's and in general, the whole concept of casinos and horse tracks together, both being mutually beneficial to one another?
That's the whole reason we did it. Had we not seen the potential success for live horse racing in Nebraska, we never would have partnered with Ho-Chunk to get these initiatives passed in the first place. As you know, we were the sponsors of the initiatives along with Ho-Chunk that owns Warhorse Casino. We are partners in that endeavor. What we're aiming for in Lincoln in particular is that for those people who are not familiar, State Fair Park ran racing in Nebraska, in Lincoln in particular, for 100 years almost. When the University of Nebraska wanted that property for Innovation Campus, it was worked out in the legislature so that the State Fair would move to Grand Island, and they abandoned horse racing. There was already Funner Park at Grand Island, so they didn't have an interest anymore. They gave up the license. The Nebraska HBPA took it over. We are the only horsemen's group in the United States that owns its own racetracks. That wasn't because we had a strong desire to do it, it's because we didn't have a choice. So we had just enough money to build the track and the simulcast facility. We meet our requirements of the minimum of race days, but our goal in Lincoln is to get to at least 80 live days of racing, if not more. That's, we used to have 39 days of racing at State Fair Park in its heyday. We would like to double that if possible. So that's the ultimate goal for the HBPA, is to funnel all of our revenue from the casino directly into horse racing. We have plans for 900 stalls. We also recently, last week as a matter of fact, bought the 155 acres next door to the Lincoln facility. So the HBPA now owns 370 acres in Lincoln. We would not have done that if we didn't plan to make a major expansion.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you, Senator Holdcroft. Horse racing, horse breeding. How's that going in Nebraska?
It has exploded. The year before the initiative made the ballot, there were 38 registered thoroughbred breed horses in the state of Nebraska. You have to have one breed race per day for a live day, or it doesn't count according to statute. We were having trouble with that, and we only had 53 mandatory live days. Since the initiatives have passed, I believe, I'd have to check with the thoroughbred breeders, they're the registry, but I believe they had over 300 foals born last year. So huge, massive increase, 10 times the number of horses in a single year than we had had up until that point. So the results have borne out already. And once the permanent facilities are completed and we're able to put our part of the revenue into racing, you're going to see a dramatic increase, not only in that, but in the overall impact of the industry. Hay, veterinarian services, all of the ag-related services that you would see with that kind of operation.
Okay, thank you. And then how long does it take a horse to develop?
3 years.
3 years.
A registered thoroughbred in Nebraska, it has to be a 3-year-old. There's only going to be one race this year that's allowed for 2-year-olds, and that's because their legs aren't fully developed and defined. And so you don't want to run a 2-year-old too much, it hurts their legs. So you really want to wait until they're 3 and older.
All right. And maybe I missed this. How many people are you going to employ at the whole facility once it is completely
Between
done?
Lincoln and Omaha, we will, Ho-Chunk Incorporated right now as a corporation is global. They have 2,000 employees worldwide. When both facilities are fully complete, they'll have about 4,500 employees. So approximately 2,500 new jobs will be created from just our 2 locations. They also have a 3rd location in South Sioux, and then Grand Island, Columbus, and Hastings will have their own employees as well. So, I mean, you really did create an entirely new industry in Nebraska that will have a lot of good paying jobs and a whole other sector that had not existed before.
Right. Thank you very much.
Thank
Are there any other questions?
Thank
Seeing none? Thank you, Ms. McNally. Are there any other proponents for Mr. Galyen? Proponents. Are there any opponents for Mr. Galyen? Are there any in the neutral? Seeing none, that closes the hearing on Jeff Galyen. And now we have Dennis Lee, the State Racing and Gaming Commission. Welcome.
Thank you. Senator Lowe, members of the committee, my name is Dennis Lee, Dennis Lee. I appear before you today having been nominated for reappointment by Governor Ricketts to the State Racing Commission. A little bit about me is I'm a lifetime Omahan. I graduated from Creighton's Law School in 1980. I've been involved in the Nebraska racing industry since I was 14 in a variety of capacities. From 1983 to 1987, I gave the clerk a copy of my resume, but from 83 to 87, I was the attorney for the State Racing Commission. 1987, I returned back to private practice in Omaha, and I got a phone call in September of 1988 from Governor Orr's chief of staff asking me if I would be interested in serving the remaining portion of Harry Farnham's term as a Nebraska Racing Commissioner. That resulted in Governor Orr appointing me on October 5th, 1988. I've been on the commission since then, so that's 34 years. And I have been chairman of the commission since 1991. Over the course of the years, as Commissioner Galyen alluded to, the racing industry has really developed and morphed. When I started as counsel for the commission back in the mid-'80s, racing was a big deal. It was Exarban was racing 85 days a year. We had races that would start in Grand Island in February and they would end in Eticat Park in South Sioux City the week before Christmas, 10 days before Christmas. Since then, the industry had some challenges, and a lot of those challenges developed when other states, specifically Iowa, began to offer casino gambling and dog tracks and riverboat gambling, which is now really what has been their shot in the arm for their racing industry. Senator Lowe, you asked Commissioner Galyen a question about how the industry has been impacted. We've had serious impacts. There was a while I wasn't really sure if the industry would survive until we were able to get some help from the people and this legislature in terms of approving casino wagering. And that has happened. And I can share with you that the Lincoln Casino, Warhorse Lincoln, opened the third week of September. And so that's roughly about 13, 14 weeks for the balance of 2022. And there has been $2.8 million in gaming tax that has been generated from not just Warhorse, but we also opened the casino at Funner Park in Grand Island. The next casino that's going to come on board is Columbus. And then I anticipate the Warhorse Omaha will be on board and operational in their temporary facility by the end of the summer or first part of the year. The racing industry has been good to me. I've had various positions. I've been the former chairman of the Racing Commissioners International, which, as the name implies, applies to all racing jurisdictions in North America, Europe, Japan, Australia. I serve I'm the chairman of the Model Rules Committee of RCI. I've been invited to speak in France and England on various drug testing and regulatory matters as it relates to the breeding and racing industry. It really is an honor for me to serve on the commission. We've got a commission of 7 members. Up until about 18 months ago, we had 2 employees. And then after LB 876 was passed and signed by the governor, we ended up having a lot of responsibilities of which we didn't have staff for. And so now our staff has grown from 2 to, I believe, we're up to 18 now. So Commissioner Galyen hinted about things didn't go as quickly as some people would have wanted. Part of that primary reason was because of our lack of staff. We are getting up to staff now. I see my time is up, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. And do we have any questions? Senator Hughes.
Thank you, and thank you. Newbie, are the 7 members of the State Racing and Gaming Commission, are you paid a per diem or something? Because you're meeting a lot now.
We are.
Versus 4 times
For the first 20, I take that back. For the first 30 years, it was a volunteer position when I was on the commission. We are now being paid $1,000 a month, and that was effective through 876.
Thank you.
Plus mileage.
Thank you, Senator Hughes. Sarah.
Just to fill in some of the gaps, is it a 4-year term?
Yes, it is.
Senator Kavanaugh.
Thank you, Chairman Lowe. Thank you, Mr. Lee, for your willingness to serve for so long and seeing the industry through the ups and downs and I guess backups now. So one of the big things we asked the commission to do is this report on the state of, I guess, gaming in the state and the potentiality for adding future casinos. How's that coming?
Well, the deadline that was in 876 was January 1 of 2025. We really, as I mentioned earlier, the Warhorse opened the 3rd week of September. So we really have limited data from which to determine what sort of impact that's going to have, not only on racing, but also the locales of where the casinos are operational and things of that matter. So we really haven't started any sort of economic impact study. We are aware that the deadline is January 1, of 2025. I think there's a bill in the legislature now to extend that further, and it might come before this committee. But at this point, simply because we have lack of number of months or even years of operations of casinos, it's premature for us to get started on that. So to be honest, we have not started that yet. Our focus has been licensing the casinos, doing our regulatory duties of security and surveillance and licensing of the staff members, training and things of that nature. But that is on our list to do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Kavanaugh, any other questions? You said you've hired 18 staff, you're up to 18 staff members now. How large do you see your staff growing?
You know, the better person to address that question would probably be Tom Sage, who's our longtime executive director. But I can see our staff with our added responsibilities, such as being involved in the impact study and licensing, not just the casinos, but the racetracks. We have our licensing office open now at Fowler Park because they're going to start in a couple of weeks of the live racing. I can see us getting up to 30. But I would defer that to the person that's involved in the day-to-day operations, and that's Tom Sage.
Would that include like investigators or
Yes.
something like that?
Yes.
State patrol?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Are there any other questions? Seeing none? Thank you. Mr.
Thank
Lee.
you for letting me appear.
I'll now ask for proponents. Welcome back.
Again, Chairman Lowe and members of the committee, Lynn McNally, LYNNE, MCNALLY, appearing on behalf of the Nebraska HBPA, as well as Warhorse Casino, Lincoln and Omaha. I would like to testify in strong support of Chairman Lee. Something that he did not mention to you is that his father was a sports writer for the Omaha World Herald, and horse racing was his beat. And so Mr. Lee grew up at Exarban. I think he's had every job. He cleaned restrooms, he sold forms and programs. I think he did every job before he went to law school and actually was legal counsel for the Racing Commission. I've been in my job for 20 years now. This is my 20th year, and Chairman Lee has probably forgotten more about horse racing than I will know. He's given me advice and guidance when I've asked about certain statutes, things like that. He's just been tremendously helpful, not only during the hearings, but on his own time. He's got a very busy law practice, but it's a very rare occasion when I call him with a question that he doesn't answer immediately. If he doesn't answer immediately, he calls right back. And, you know, usually it's something obscure that only he would know. I asked him the other day about, we've got construction issues in Omaha. And so I asked him about simulcast wagering on live racing. And it was a very technical question. He knew off the top of his head that, you know, it would take somebody else days of research to figure it out. So I can't say enough positive things about him. If we didn't have him in the process of creating an entirely new, very large division of the state of Nebraska, I honestly don't know what any of us would have done. Without his knowledge and experience, this simply would not have been possible. On a personal note, I have never missed a commission hearing since I've had this job, never. I had a stroke in May and was hospitalized for a month and couldn't speak, had a feeding tube for several months. It was very difficult. They had a pretty significant hearing while I was in the hospital, and I was heartbroken about not being there. And I found out later that he entered into the record that I was there in spirit so I could keep my unbroken streak. I think that's a very kind thing to do. And it's something that he didn't have to do, but it was very meaningful to me. So I appreciated that very much. Thank you. I'll answer any questions.
Thanks, Ms. McNally. Are there any questions? Seeing none?
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents? Are there any opponents, Mr. Lee? Are there any in the neutral? Seeing none, that closes the hearing for Dennis Lee. Yes, you may. Next up, we have Susan Lutz for Nebraska Commission on Problem Gambling. Are you there, Ms. Lutz?
Hi, I am. This is Susie. I'm on the phone.
Okay. Could you please pronounce your name and then spell your full name?
Susan Lutz, SUSANLUTZ.
All right. Thank you. Can you please tell us about yourself and why you are up for appointment?
I am up for appointment this year for the Nebraska Problem Gamblers Assistance Program, the Commission on Problem Gambling. This will be my 10th year with that group. I am an accountant. I am a CFO at a bank here in Norfolk, Nebraska. I grew up in Nebraska in Tacoma, and my husband and I lived in Lincoln for a few years while he finished college, and we had children, and I received my accounting degree from Wayne State College and have just built our life here in Norfolk. I was asked 9 years ago or so to if I would lend my accounting support to the commission when they left the Department of Social Services. So that's kind of, I've just been there ever since. It's an interesting group, and we're pretty much charged with just making sure that the funds that our commission is allocated are spent appropriately, and we are to do our best to do that.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Lutz. Are there any questions? Yes, Ms. Rabel, or Senator Rabel, excuse me.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Lutz. Since you're the accountant, and can you tell us how much funding is typically allocated to the work that you do?
Well, the budget that we submitted this last year was for almost $3.2 million. We do a form of base budgeting, and so we submit a biennial budget. Most of that we're required to spend, and I think it's $350,000 on messaging, or whether that be preventive or if that is some sort of messaging about problem gambling. But the bulk of our funds is spent hiring counselors to help problem gamblers.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Senator Rabel. Senator Holdcroft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator, Ms. Lutz, Senator Holdcroft here, and just assume I knew nothing about the Nebraska Commission on Problem Gambling. Can you fill me in? And
okay.
How many folks are on the commission, and what is your role, and how long is the term, and how are you appointed?
There are 9 of us on the commission. We also have a staff of 2, an executive director, David Galyen, and then also he has an administrative assistant who is more than that, I would say, Ann McCollister. We serve a 3-year term, and we're kind of staggered, so we don't all fall off at the same time. I was just appointed by the governor, just like anyone else. And so when it came time to apply for reappointment, I did that, and that's kind of our process. We are set up to have somebody who has financial acumen. We're set up to have somebody with some medical background. We have a lawyer. We have a lawyer on this commission, and we also have folks who have used our services on the commission. So it's a pretty diverse group of folks when we get together. We meet 4 times a year. And those meetings are just pretty full of budget considerations and vision planning on what the commission will be doing in the future. My interest, right now I serve as the chair of the commission. And again, my interest is just to make sure that we're spending the money the way we're supposed to be and where it will probably do us the most good.
So thank you. Can you tell me more about what you spend the money on as far as do you finance organizations that help with problem gambling or how does that work?
We mostly counselors. Mostly we have counselors throughout the state, and I think we have, you know what, I don't know how many we have, but we have counselors throughout the state that we have strategically tried to, we have provided them with education through Bellevue University, and they get certified as certified gambling counselors. Most of our funds go to supporting them, and they submit their billable time just like they would any other, basically an insurance type thing, but they submit their time to us and then we reimburse them for that. Folks who have problems with gambling don't have any money. And so that's kind of what drives them to seek assistance. And so without this program, there would be no money to provide counseling for them because most insurances don't provide funding for problem gamblers. Also, we do the marketing piece. We spend our money on that. We have an analytical consultant that he has been providing information, and I'm sure we could make that available to you on who we've helped, what demographics are most likely to require help, and through the years how that's progressed. And we have, again, we have a staff of 2.
Thank you, Ms. Lutz. It's very helpful.
Okay, thank you, Senator Holdcroft. Are there any other questions for Ms. Lutz? Seeing none, thank you very much. If you hold on, we'll go through the proponents and opponents that you might listen to if there are any here. Are there any proponents? Seeing none, are there any opponents? Seeing none, is there anybody in the neutral? Seeing none. Ms. Lutz, thank you very much for holding online and being with us today.
Thanks for having me. Thank you. Have a great day.
Okay, thank you.
The caller
Susie Lutz
has left the conference.
Okay. Next, we have Matthew John Monheiser.
That's correct.
Okay. Welcome to the General Affairs Committee. If you would please say your name and then pronounce your full name and spell it.
Matthew John Monheiser, Mathew Johnmonheiser.
All right. Thank you very much. Give us a brief history about yourself and tell us why you would like to be on the Nebraska Commission for Problem Gambling.
Sure, mine's a little bit more colorful, I guess you could say. I believe there's 2 positions on the commission that are consumers. I had the unfortunate pleasure of being one back in, not being on the committee, but being a consumer of gambling. So in 2000 and 2011, I believe it was, I got caught for an embezzlement of like $1,346,000. I was working at a bank, running it. I took the money, gambled it all, every bit of it. After I got caught, I talked to two of my friends, raised the money, paid the bank back in full within 30 days, all principal, interest, and their attorney fees. They're made whole. I got sentenced to 3 years in prison. I did that, and I came out, and in 2016 I was released. And I came out, and now we do real estate, purchased quite a few homes, and actually got a group of investors and purchased the majority of the Cabela's assets from their, when they left Sydney. We purchased the distribution center and the strip malls, and I managed to fill all those and get people in there and start some new businesses. And in 2020, I was voted by the Chamber of Commerce Business Leader of the Year. So kind of, when I got out of prison, I didn't really want to go back to Sydney, but now I'm glad I was there. I really liked Sydney. The commission's important to me because I think it's important for people to understand, have the ability, know where to go if they're in trouble, know who to contact, how to stop, where to get treatment, things of that nature. And just helping identify if you're a problem gambler. That's my colorful story.
Well, thank you very much for telling us that. Are there any questions? I don't see any questions for you right now. How is Sydney doing?
Really well. Right now, when we purchased the Cabela's business or warehouses, there were 8 open warehouses. Took us 2 years. We have 87 different businesses in there right now. Sydney has 26 houses on the market, down from 230 in 2016. We're a much more diverse and I feel better community now. We don't have all our eggs in one basket. We have the ability to entertain new businesses without getting friction from maybe another business in town saying that would go against my employees or whatever. It's done really well. It's doing well.
I'm assuming your background is a good one for problem gambling, speaking with people.
Oh yeah, yep. I was really bad at it. I don't think you've got many problem gamblers that are good at it, but yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I see no other questions. We now have a full contingent back. We've had people out discussing bills in other committees, but now we're all back. I was just kind of giving them time to see if they wanted to ask any questions. So I will ask if there are any proponents. Mr. Monheiser. Are there any opponents? Are there any in the neutral? Seeing none. Thank you for joining us today. And
thank you.
We will be back in touch.
For appointing me to the committee.
Yes.
Thank you.
The caller,
Matt Monheiser,
has left the conference.
Okay, so our next appointment to the Nebraska Commission on Problem Gambling is John Pulverenti.
Yes, I'm here. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. If you would please
All right.
say your name and then spell it for the transcribers, please, and then give us a short story.
Yeah, John Pulverenti, JOHNPULVERENTI. So I'm grew up in Omaha, went to school at Creighton, went to law school at Nebraska. Right now I'm a transactional attorney in Omaha for a financial firm here. This will be my first term on the Problem Gaming Association. I'm interested in getting on the Problem Gaming Commission, mainly because I think this is a really important resource for people in the state, and I think it's important to make sure this is a continued resource and that the resource is providing people with the sources of counseling that it needs and appropriate counseling.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I see that you have a background in iGaming and sports betting regulations.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So when I actually first got out of law school, I did some legal work for some iGaming and sports betting companies. I mean, when I got out of law school, it was 2018, so it was basically right before everybody started legalizing, or every state started legalizing these regulations, and so there was a lot of legal work to do with those things and interpreting different state statutes and regulatory schemes for a lot of small entrepreneurs that wanted to pursue those kind of opportunities. Was available. So I did a lot of legal work and a lot of research on those regulations and statutes. And I think through those, through that work, you kind of saw a general theme that I thought was an important theme in a lot of those statutes and regulations around ensuring there was appropriate consumer protections and appropriate consumer resources available based on funds that were generated from gaming. And so that kind of trickled into the reason of wanting to get on the Nebraska Problem Gaming Association to ensure, like I said, that those resources are available and for the people that need them.
All right. Thank you. I will ask for any questions from the committee. Are there any questions? Seeing none, I will now ask for any proponents. Are there any proponents for Mr. Pulverenti? Are there any opponents? Is there anybody in the neutral? Seeing none, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
That closes the hearing.
The caller,
John Pulverenti,
has left the conference.
Our next appointment is John Hiller to the State Electrical Board. Pronounce your name.
Yes, my name is John Hiller, JOHN HILLER. State Electrical, I've been nominated to the State Electrical Board. My background is I'm a fourth generation Nebraskan, lived here my whole life. The second generation electrical my dad. I grew up in the industry, so from the time I was 12, I've been around the electrical industry. I've been on the State Electrical Board for 15 years. This is a reappointment. Each board term is for 5 years. A background on the State Electrical Board. The State Electrical Board is tasked with overseeing the State Electrical Act, which was passed back in the 1970s. And the State Electrical Act is to ensure safe electrical installations in the state of Nebraska. As such, we hire electrical inspectors throughout the state that then live within 15 different districts of this within the state of Nebraska. We are also we are a self-funded organization. We don't rely on tax dollars. The money is raised through license fees and through permits as projects come in. The board is comprised of 7 members, and I'm more than happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Senator
We
Wolf.
answered all my questions to begin with here. Got ahead of me.
I've been watching, so I thought maybe
Yes.
some of that might be helpful.
What's the difference between a state inspector and the inspector that the city hires?
That's a good question. The state is the overall organization that oversees electrical installations. Municipalities can then apply to have their own inspection program. Those inspection programs have to meet the minimum of what the state act calls for. So they make application to the state electrical division to have their own inspections. The state grants them that right. We oversee that to make sure that they have hired qualified inspectors and have the resources to do those inspections. But there are numerous municipal and county inspections throughout the state.
Thank you very much, Senator Oldcroft. Are there any other questions? You waited long enough.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Are there any proponents for Mr. Hiller? Are there any opponents for Mr. Hiller? Is there anybody in the neutral? Seeing none, that closes our hearing and our committee hearing for the day. Thank you very much.
That's a good question.
Would you like a minute?
No, I do too.
Was asking all the questions.
When
I was
did we
gonna
get-
ask.
Yeah, I know. You guys were kind of-
I knew that we were doing the-
We'll probably
So, right away, just ask some questions. But I was
in a
confused.
couple of days.
So that
In a couple of
first
Probably
one,
just
I was
underneath the
like,
balcony.
really
Oh,
familiar.
you're
Like her whole body was.
I don't know if I can remember that.
Really, she was-
So I got my little